The heavy black drone case sat untouched in the corner of the briefing room as Lieutenant Maya Chen watched senior officers file past her. Their conversations stopped whenever they noticed her presence, replaced by knowing glances and subtle smirks. 3 weeks had passed since her demonstration had failed spectacularly in front of the Joint Chiefs. 3 weeks since her innovative drone program had been labeled experimental at best, dangerous at worst in the official report. Now she sat with a tablet displaying her new assignment, technical consultant, non-operational status. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Strategic Defense Innovation Center hummed with activity around her. Uniformed personnel and civilian contractors moved with purpose through the underground facility, their security badges displaying clearance levels Maya no longer possessed. The antiseptic smell of the climate-controlled environment mixed with coffee and electronics, the familiar scent of military technology development that had once felt like home. Maya adjusted her glasses and checked the time. The morning briefing would end soon, and she'd be assigned to whatever drone project needed an observer. Usually, it meant sitting behind a monitoring station, while some conventionally trained operator demonstrated standard protocols, treating her like a student who needed remedial lessons. Colonel Victor Harrison emerged from the briefing room, his confidence evident even in the sterile corridor. He was everything the Defense Department wanted in a project lead: methodical, by the book, and blessed with the kind of traditional military background that made generals feel comfortable. His crisp uniform displayed rows of combat decorations, each one reinforcing his authority in ways Maya's academic achievements never could. "Morning, Chen," he said, his tone carrying just enough condescension to sting. "Hope you're ready for some real drone operations today. We're running the Raptor MQ-9 through tactical simulations. Should be educational for you." She nodded without speaking. What was there to say? That she'd written 3 algorithms that revolutionized autonomous flight paths? That her doctoral research on swarm intelligence had been classified because it was too advanced? That she could program circles around operators who still treated drones like remote-controlled toys? The walk to the simulation chamber felt longer than usual. Other team members barely acknowledged her presence, their attention focused on the day's testing protocols. She passed 2 systems engineers who didn't bother hiding their glances. One nudged the other and whispered something that made them both chuckle. The phrase "toy maker" carried clearly over the ambient noise of computers. Maya kept her expression neutral. She'd learned not to react to the comments, the sideways looks, the assumption that she was somehow less capable because she'd been pulled from active development. The official report had used clinical language, unconventional approach to unmanned systems, failure to adhere to established security protocols, and unnecessary risk to strategic assets. What it really meant was that she tried to demonstrate how autonomous drones could work together in ways humans couldn't predict or control. The incident replayed in her mind as she entered the simulation chamber. The demonstration had been her moment to shine. A simulated threat environment with multiple hostile targets, electronic countermeasures, and complex terrain. When the lead drone in her swarm detected anomalous behavior, and the observation team demanded she abort the mission, she'd calculated her options in seconds. The swarm was still functioning as designed. She could complete the objective safely. But that wasn't what they wanted to hear. They wanted compliance, not creativity. They wanted operators who followed the manual, not engineers who rewrote the rules. The simulation chamber smelled like electronic components and industrial carpet. Maya settled into her designated monitoring station and began running through her mental checklist, even though no one had asked her to. Power distribution, network latency, visual recognition systems. She checked them all with the precision of someone who genuinely cared about the technology's integrity. Colonel Harrison took the primary operator seat, logging into the system. With exaggerated keystrokes, he toggled the communications channel before completing his pre-flight checks, his voice carrying the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned the established way of doing things. "Control, this is Raptor Lead, ready for simulation run," he announced. "Got our observer monitoring, so we'll keep it interesting." Maya focused on her screen and said nothing. Her job was to watch and learn, not to contribute. The irony wasn't lost on her that she probably knew more about autonomous systems than most of the operators, who still had their development credentials. But knowledge without authority was just expensive education. As the simulation prepared to launch, Maya caught her reflection in the darkened monitor. She looked like any other defense engineer, focused, prepared, ready for whatever challenges might arise. But appearances, she'd learned, could be deceiving. The virtual battlefield stretched endlessly on her screen. Digital terrain that seemed to mirror the uncertainty of her future. Somewhere out there, in the vast complexity of defense technology and military bureaucracy, lay the answer to a question she'd been afraid to ask. Would she ever get another chance to prove herself? The simulation engaged with a flurry of activity, flooding her screen with data as the Raptor drone entered the virtual airspace. For a moment, despite everything, Maya smiled. Whatever happened next, she was still working with drones, still. Part of the technological revolution that had captured her imagination since childhood. Lieutenant Colonel James Washington observed the simulation from the elevated platform reserved for senior leadership. His weathered face revealed nothing as he watched both Harrison at the controls and Maya at her monitoring station. As director of special projects, Washington had authorized Maya's original research before the demonstration that ended with her reassignment. Now he seemed to be evaluating her as much as the simulation itself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The virtual mission was straightforward. The Raptor drone needed to identify and neutralize 3 ground targets while avoiding detection by simulated enemy air defenses. Maya watched Harrison's methodical approach with professional interest. His technique was textbook perfect, following every protocol in exactly the order specified in the operations manual. "Beautiful day for a sim run," Harrison commented over. "The internal comes, systems are nominal. This Raptor handles like a dream." Maya noticed small inefficiencies that Harrison seemed to miss. His approach vector exposed the drone to unnecessary risk from simulated radar sites. The targeting algorithm was calibrating too slowly because he hadn't adjusted for the terrain interference patterns. The stealth profile was compromised by his altitude selection. Nothing dangerous, but certainly not optimal. She made mental notes of everything, a habit that had served her well throughout her career. "Seeing anything interesting over there, Chun?" Harrison asked, his tone suggesting he expected nothing more than basic observations. "Systems are nominal," Maya replied simply. There was no point in mentioning the inefficiencies. Her job was to observe, not to critique. The simulation progressed predictably. Harrison methodically worked through the mission parameters, eliminating targets one by one with competent if uninspired technique. Maya found herself relaxing slightly, letting the familiar rhythm of drone operations wash over her. Maybe this assignment wouldn't be so bad after all. That thought lasted exactly 42 seconds. The change was subtle at first. One of the simulation monitors began displaying anomalous data. The threat environment was evolving in ways that weren't part of the standard program. Harrison's responses became slightly delayed, his technique losing some of its confidence. His hand on the control pad seemed less steady, small corrections suggesting he was fighting to maintain control of the situation. "You seeing this?" Maya asked, leaning forward to analyze the unexpected data patterns. No response. Harrison continued working the controls, but his movements had become more urgent, less precise. "Colonel Harrison?" Maya tried again, louder this time. "Are you registering these anomalies?" Still nothing. The simulation continued running, but Maya could see that Harrison was falling behind the rapidly evolving threat scenario. His expression had shifted from confidence to barely concealed concern as the simulation introduced variables that weren't in the standard program. Training kicked in before conscious thought. Maya's hands moved to her auxiliary controls, fingers, dancing across the interface with practiced precision. She'd studied every aspect of the Raptor's systems, memorized every protocol and failure mode. The knowledge she'd accumulated during years of research and development suddenly became very relevant. "Control, this is Lieutenant Chen," she transmitted, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Simulation has introduced non-standard variables. Requesting permission to assist primary operator." The response came immediately, sharp with disbelief. "Negative, Chen. You're not authorized for operational control." Maya had already begun analyzing the anomalous patterns. The simulation had spontaneously introduced what appeared to be a new class of electronic countermeasures that were systematically degrading the Raptor's sensors. Harrison was trying to compensate using standard protocols, but the threat was evolving too quickly for conventional responses. "Control, I've identified the pattern in the anomalies," she repeated, her voice steady. "This appears to be an adaptive electronic warfare system that's learning from our countermeasures. Standard protocols won't be effective." A different voice came through the communication system, this one belonging to Lieutenant Colonel Washington. "What do you recommend, Lieutenant Chen?" Maya felt every eye in the room turn toward her. "The system is using our own emissions against U.S. Each countermeasure we deploy gives it more information about our capabilities. We need to go dark, then deploy a deception pattern that will make it think we're using standard countermeasures while actually approaching from an unexpected vector." The silence that followed was telling. Maya could almost hear the frantic conversations taking place in the control room, the rapid consultations with simulation technicians, the calls to supervising officers. She just created a situation that probably wasn't covered in anybody's operation manual. While they figured out what to do with her suggestion, Maya continued to monitor the deteriorating situation. Harrison was losing control of the simulation rapidly now. 3 new threat emitters had appeared, creating a nearly impenetrable defense network around the remaining targets. The Raptor's stealth capabilities were being systematically neutralized as the simulated enemy adapted to each standard countermeasure. She ran through her options. The simulation was clearly testing adaptive response capabilities. The standard protocols were failing by design. This wasn't just a normal training run. It was an evaluation of how operators handled unexpected, evolving threats. And Harrison was failing. "Chun, this is Washington. What's your experience with adaptive electronic countermeasures?" Maya almost laughed. "I wrote my doctoral thesis on dynamic response patterns for autonomous systems facing adaptive threats, sir. I designed 3 different algorithms specifically to counter learning systems like what we're seeing here. Simulations don't count as operational experience, Chen. With respect, sir, it's the experience that matters right now. Unless you've got another specialist in adaptive counter-electronic warfare I don't know about." Another pause. Maya could practically hear the wheels turning, the rapid calculations of risk versus protocol. She'd put them in an impossible position, and everyone knew it. "Stand by, Chen," Washington finally said. "We're evaluating options." Maya settled back in her seat, eyes fixed on the data streams that told the story of a simulation rapidly spiraling beyond conventional control. The virtual battlefield stretched endlessly on her screen, beautiful and indifferent to the drama playing out in the control room. Whatever solution they came up with, she'd be ready for it. She'd been preparing for this moment, or one like it, for years. The only question was whether they'd let her prove she was ready, or whether protocol would trump common sense. Either way, she was back in the game. And for the first time in weeks, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The waiting felt eternal. Maya had been watching the simulation deteriorate for 12 minutes while leadership debated what to do. Colonel Harrison continued his increasingly desperate attempts to regain control, but the adaptive threat was now systematically dismantling the Raptor's defensive capabilities. The virtual drone would be neutralized within minutes if something didn't change. "Chun, this is Washington." The comms crackled. "We're transferring auxiliary control to your station. Your objective is to preserve the asset and complete the mission if possible." Maya's fingers were moving before Washington finished speaking. First, she needed to break the cycle of adaptation that was crippling their systems. "Initiating full emissions shutdown," she announced, cutting all active sensors and communications from the virtual drone. The screens went momentarily dark, as the Raptor became virtually invisible, to both the enemy and to its operators. "What are you doing?" Harrison demanded, his composure cracking. "You've just blinded us completely." "Respectfully, sir, they were using our own emissions to track and counter us," Maya replied, already implementing the next phase of her strategy. "Deploying autonomous backup systems now." She activated a secondary operating mode that relied on passive sensors only. No radar, no active targeting, nothing that emitted detectable signals. The drone would use ambient electromagnetic radiation, visual processing, and terrain mapping to navigate. It was a mode she had helped develop, but that rarely saw use because most operators weren't trained for it. "Control, I'm implementing a deception pattern next," she explained, fingers flying across the interface. "I'll deploy mini-drones, programmed to mimic standard counter-electronic measures from multiple vectors. While the enemy system is busy adapting to those, our actual platform will approach from an unexpected angle." Maya could sense the skepticism in the room. Her approach violated half a dozen standard operating procedures. It relied on the drone's autonomous systems making decisions that operators typically controlled directly. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten her removed from active development, but it was also working. The simulated enemy defenses began shifting resources to counter the decoy emissions, leaving gaps in their coverage. Maya guided the Raptor through one of these gaps, using minimal power and relying on passive systems that were nearly impossible to detect. "Target acquisition in 30 seconds, she reported calmly. "Requesting permission to engage." "You're still 15 degrees off optimal approach vector," Harrison commented, apparently unable to resist criticizing her technique. "That's intentional," Maya replied. "A predictable approach, even if technically optimal, is exactly what their adaptive systems are designed to counter. Sometimes imperfection is the perfect strategy." The simulation control room had gone completely silent. Every technician, every operator, every officer was watching as Maya's unorthodox approach unfolded. The Raptor slipped through the defensive network without triggering a single alarm, positioning itself perfectly to neutralize all 3 targets simultaneously. "Targets acquired," she announced. "Engaging now." The simulation displayed a successful mission completion, with all objectives achieved and the asset preserved intact. The threat assessment system, designed to adapt and learn from operator patterns, had been effectively countered by Maya's unpredictable approach. As the simulation ended, Maya became acutely aware of the silence in the room. She turned to find Washington standing directly behind her, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Chen, my office, now." The walk to Washington's office felt like a journey to the gallows. Maya had directly violated protocols, taken control when explicitly told to observe only, and implemented strategies that were still classified. as experimental. The fact that she'd succeeded almost didn't matter. The military valued process as much as results, sometimes more. Washington's office was Spartan, with only a few personal items breaking the institutional uniformity. He gestured for her to sit while he remained standing, looking out at the windowless underground facility through a digital screen displaying the world above. "That was quite a performance, Lieutenant," he finally said, his tone neutral. "Thank you, sir. But I recognize that I overstepped my... Do you know what simulation you just defeated?" Washington interrupted, turning to face her. Maya hesitated. "It appeared to be an adaptive electronic warfare scenario, sir. Possibly based on the theoretical next-generation systems being developed by..." "It wasn't theoretical," Washington said flatly. "That was a direct recording of an actual encounter from last month. An encounter that resulted in the loss of 2 Raptor platforms and nearly compromised a critical operation." Maya felt her breath catch. "Sir? The adaptive defense system you just defeated is real, Lieutenant. We've lost 4 advanced drones to it in the past 6 weeks. No operator has been able to counter it effectively using standard protocols." Washington sat down behind his desk, studying her with new interest. The simulation was classified. Only the senior staff knew what it really represented. Harrison certainly didn't. He thought he was running a standard training scenario. "So this was a test," Maya said slowly. "You were evaluating my response." "We were evaluating everyone's response," Washington corrected. "You're the first to successfully counter the system. Your approach, using the drone's autonomous capabilities rather than trying to control everything directly, is exactly what our conventional thinkers have been resistant to." Maya processed this information carefully. "Sir, if I may ask, is this why I was reassigned after my demonstration? Because my swarm technology relies on the same autonomous decision-making that just proved effective?" Washington's expression softened slightly. "The Joint Chiefs aren't comfortable with systems they can't directly control, Lieutenant. Your demonstration scared them because your drones made decisions faster and better than human operators could have. The fact that you were right didn't make them any less uncomfortable." He opened a folder on his desk. "However, the successful demonstration may change some minds. We're facing advanced threats that can't be countered with conventional thinking. We need innovators who aren't bound by traditional approaches." "What happens now, sir?" Washington stood again. "Now you come with me. There's someone who wants to meet you." 20 minutes later, Maya found herself in a secure conference room she'd never been allowed to enter before. The walls displayed classified satellite imagery of a region she recognized as part of the disputed South China Sea territories. A woman in civilian clothes stood studying the images, her bearing suggesting military background despite her lack of uniform. "Lieutenant Chen, this is Dr. Elise Morgan, Director of the Advanced Defense Systems Initiative," Washington said. Morgan turned, her sharp eyes evaluating Maya with obvious interest. "Lieutenant, I've been following your work for some time. Your theories on autonomous swarm behavior and adaptive response patterns are years ahead of conventional thinking." "Thank you, ma'am." "What do you know about Project Hummingbird?" Morgan asked abruptly. Maya hesitated. "Only rumors, ma'am. It's supposed to be a classified micro-drone program for close-quarters reconnaissance and possibly tactical support. Beyond that, I don't have clearance to know more." Morgan nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "Hummingbird was shelved 6 months ago because we couldn't solve the autonomous coordination problem. The operating environment was too complex for conventional control systems, and the bandwidth requirements for direct operator control made the platform vulnerable to detection and jamming." She gestured to the satellite imagery. "We need Hummingbird now. We have a situation developing that requires exactly the kind of technology you've been advocating for." Maya studied the imagery more closely. The resolution was extraordinary, revealing what appeared to be a new class of mobile missile launcher being deployed to a disputed island chain. The launchers were positioned in heavily forested areas, making them difficult to monitor continuously. These launchers represent a significant escalation, Morgan continued. They're mobile, they're hidden, and they're capable of targeting our naval assets across a substantial portion of international waters. We need to monitor them continuously without revealing our surveillance capabilities. Washington stepped forward. Lieutenant Chen, Dr. Morgan is proposing that we revive Project Hummingbird with you as the lead systems architect. You would have 8 weeks to develop a functional prototype based on your swarm intelligence research. Maya felt a surge of excitement that she carefully controlled. Ma'am, sir, I'm honored by the confidence, but my security clearance was reduced after my last demonstration. Morgan smiled thinly. Consider it restored, effective immediately. The situation has evolved, Lieutenant. What seemed like dangerous innovation 3 weeks ago now looks like necessary adaptation. As Morgan left, Washington turned to Maya with a serious expression. This is your second chance, Lieutenant. Don't waste it. 8 weeks later, Maya stood in the control center of a mobile command unit positioned on the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Around her, a team of engineers and operators prepared for the first field deployment of Project Hummingbird. The system looked nothing like conventional military hardware. Instead of the menacing profile of standard military drones, the Hummingbird units resembled actual hummingbirds, delicate, small, and deceptively fragile in appearance. Each micro-drone was no larger than a man's palm, constructed from advanced composite materials with flexible wing structures that mimicked natural bird movement. Their propulsion systems were nearly silent, their sensors integrated so seamlessly into the design that they were invisible to casual observation. Most importantly, they were designed to work as a collective, sharing information and making coordinated decisions without constant human direction. Final systems check complete, Maya reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Hummingbird swarm is ready for deployment. Admiral Patricia Reynolds nodded from her position overseeing the operation. You understand. The parameters, Lieutenant. This is reconnaissance only. Your drones are to observe and report, nothing more. Under no circumstances are they to engage or reveal themselves. Yes, ma'am. The swarm is programmed to maintain absolute stealth. If detected, they will initiate dispersal protocols and return via separate routes. The initial deployment was textbook perfect. 48 micro-drones launched from the carrier, quickly disappearing into the cloudy sky as they headed toward the disputed islands. Unlike conventional drones that required constant communication with operators, the Hummingbird swarm operated semi-autonomously, communicating with the command center only when necessary and using encrypted burst transmissions that were nearly impossible to detect. 4 hours into the mission, the first intelligence began flowing back. The Hummingbird units had positioned themselves around the missile installations, using natural cover and mimicking local bird movements to avoid detection. Their sensors captured detailed imagery of the launchers, including technical specifications that had eluded satellite reconnaissance. They've made modifications to the launch systems, Maya observed, studying the incoming data. These aren't just defensive weapons. They've been adapted for first strike capabilities. Admiral Reynolds frowned. That changes the strategic calculation significantly. Can your drones maintain surveillance indefinitely? The current swarm can operate for approximately 72 hours before requiring battery replacement. However, we've designed them to cycle back in groups of 4 for recharging while maintaining continuous coverage. The operation continued smoothly for the next 18 hours. The intelligence gathered by the Hummingbird swarm provided unprecedented insight into the capabilities and intentions of the forces occupying the disputed territory. Military analysts aboard the carrier worked continuously, updating threat assessments. and strategic recommendations based on the new information. Then, without warning, everything changed. Movement at Sites 3 and 7, Maya announced, noting sudden activity around 2 of the missile installations. They're preparing the launchers for operation. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers relayed information and prepared response options. Satellite imagery confirmed Maya's report. The missile systems were being activated in a pattern consistent with imminent launch. All signs indicate preparation for an actual launch, not a drill, the intelligence officer reported. Estimated time to firing capability, 12 minutes. Admiral Reynolds assessed the situation with calm efficiency. Target analysis? Based on trajectory and range, they could be targeting this carrier group or the Allied naval base at Yokosuka. Both are within range. Launch strike packages to neutralize the threat, Reynolds ordered. And get our defensive systems to full readiness. Maya watched the situation unfold with growing concern. The strike packages, fighter jets armed with precision munitions, would take at least 15 minutes to reach the launch sites. By then, the missiles could already be airborne. As she monitored the Hummingbird feed, she noticed something the others had missed. The launcher systems were receiving targeting data via a single communications array positioned at the center of the island. All command and control flowed through that nexus. An idea formed, dangerous, unauthorized, but potentially effective. "Admiral," Maya said, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the command center. "I have a potential option." Reynolds turned, her expression making it clear that time was critical. "Make it quick, Lieutenant." "The missile systems are networked through a central communications array. If we disrupt that array, we could prevent launch long enough for the strike package to arrive. And how do you propose we do that? We don't have assets in position." Maya took a deep breath. "We do, ma'am. The Hummingbird swarm." A stunned silence fell over the command center. "Those are observation platforms," the operations officer objected. "They're not designed for offensive operations." "They're not," Maya agreed, "but they're designed to work collectively. If I reconfigure the swarm to target the communication arrays, power systems, and cooling units simultaneously, we could force a system reset without causing permanent damage." Admiral Reynolds studied her for a long moment. "That's not what your drones are authorized for, Lieutenant." "No, ma'am. But they're the only assets we have that can respond in time." The tactical display showed the missile launchers continuing their preparation sequence. The estimated time to launch had decreased to 9 minutes. "Do it," Reynolds ordered. "But understand that you're taking full responsibility for this decision." Maya's fingers flew across her console, sending new instructions to the Hummingbird swarm. This was exactly the kind of autonomous operation she had designed them for, adapting to unexpected circumstances and executing complex coordinated actions without step-by-step human control. On the tactical display, tiny dots representing the micro-drones began converging on the communications array. Their movements were precise, coordinated, appearing almost choreographed as they approached their target from multiple vectors. "Hummingbird swarm is in position," Maya reported. "Initiating coordinated action now." The command center watched. Intense silence as the swarm executed Maya's instructions. Some units targeted cooling vents, deliberately overheating sensitive equipment. Others focused on power connections, creating minute disruptions that would trigger safety protocols. None of the actions would cause permanent damage, but together they would force the system to temporarily shut down. "Communications array is showing signs of instability," the intelligence officer reported, studying the sensor data. "Power fluctuations detected." "Missile launch sequence has paused," another officer announced. "They appear to be experiencing command and control issues." For 3 critical minutes, the Hummingbird swarm continued their precisely coordinated disruption. The communications array struggled to maintain operation, repeatedly attempting to reset as the micro-drones countered. Each recovery effort. Strike package is 4 minutes from target, the Air Operations Officer reported. Maya watched the tactical display with growing concern. The communications array was adapting to the disruption, rerouting systems, and bringing backup power online. Faster than anticipated. The hummingbird swarm was maintaining pressure, but the window was closing. Then disaster struck. Missile launch detected. The warning cut through the command center like a physical blow. Single missile, bearing 045, ascending rapidly. Admiral Reynolds remained outwardly calm, but her voice carried new urgency. Defensive systems online. Prepare for potential impact. Maya stared at her console in disbelief. The missile had launched despite the swarm's efforts. The communications array had managed to transmit launch authorization to one of the platforms before being disrupted. Impact projection? Reynolds demanded. Trajectory indicates this carrier as the primary target, the tactical officer reported grimly. Estimated impact in 6 minutes. The defensive systems of the carrier group were formidable, designed to intercept exactly this kind of threat. But no system was foolproof, and a single successful strike could cause catastrophic damage. Maya looked back at her hummingbird control. Interface, an impossible idea forming. The swarm had been designed for reconnaissance, not interception. The micro-drones were too small, too fragile to physically affect a missile. But perhaps they didn't need to affect it physically. "Admiral, I have one more option," she said, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was proposing. The missile likely uses infrared and radar for terminal guidance. If I reconfigure the remaining hummingbird units, they might be able to confuse its targeting systems long enough for our defensive countermeasures to work. Reynolds didn't hesitate. Do it. Maya sent new instructions to the swarm, recalling units from the communications array and redirecting them toward the missile's projected flight path. This was beyond anything the hummingbird system had been designed for, pushing the limits of both the technology and her own programming skills. "Hummingbird units are repositioning," she reported. "Configuring for electronic countermeasures now." The entire command center seemed to hold its breath as the tiny drones raced to intercept the incoming missile. On paper, it was an absurd mismatch. Delicate reconnaissance platforms against a high-speed weapon of war. But Maya had designed the hummingbird swarm to be adaptable, to work collectively in ways that transcended their individual limitations. "Missile has entered terminal guidance phase," the tactical officer announced. "Our defensive systems are having trouble maintaining lock. It's using advanced countermeasures." Maya watched as her swarm of tiny drones positioned themselves along the missile's approach vector. They were coordinating autonomously now, using the collective intelligence algorithms she had developed to determine optimal positioning without human input. "Hummingbird swarm is engaging," she reported, watching as the micro-drones began emitting carefully calibrated electromagnetic signals, designed to confuse the missile's guidance systems. Some units mimicked the carrier's thermal signature, creating false targets. Others focused on jamming radar frequencies. Together, they created a symphony of electronic deception. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. The missile continued its approach, apparently unaffected by the desperate countermeasures. Then, almost imperceptibly, its trajectory began to shift. "Missile is deviating from approach vector," the tactical officer reported, surprise evident in his voice. "Our defensive systems have reacquired lock." The Sea Sparrow defensive missiles launched from the carrier, streaking toward the incoming threat. But they weren't needed. The hummingbird swarm had done their job, confusing the missile's guidance system so thoroughly that it veered sharply away from its intended target, eventually losing thrust and plummeting harmlessly into the ocean. The command center erupted in controlled celebration as the threat indicator disappeared from the tactical display. Strike package has reached target, the Air Operations Officer reported. Missile sites neutralized. Admiral Reynolds turned to Maya, her expression a mixture of astonishment and respect. Lieutenant Chen, I believe you just made military history. Your toy drones just saved this carrier and everyone on it. Maya felt a wave of emotion that she carefully controlled. After weeks of dismissal and doubt, her vision had been vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. The hummingbird swarm, technology that had been mocked as unrealistic and dangerous, had just proven its value beyond any possible doubt. Maya felt a strange combination of vindication and frustration. Who overruled you? A committee, headed by General Maxwell Williams. He's been vocally opposed to autonomous systems development for years. He believes such technology removes too much direct human control from military operations. The same concern that got me sidelined after my demonstration, Maya realized. Exactly. Williams has significant influence within the Defense Department. He's been blocking advanced autonomous programs systematically, arguing that they create unacceptable strategic risks. Bennett, who had been quietly observing their conversation, finally spoke up. What happened on the Roosevelt changes everything. Your drones just proved that autonomous systems can respond to threats faster and more effectively than conventional approaches. Even Williams can't argue with those results. Speaking of which, Weaver added, I should warn you that General Williams is scheduled to visit this facility tomorrow. He'll want to see exactly what your system can do, and he'll be looking for any weakness or limitation to justify shutting it down. Maya felt a chill run through her. After finally getting the chance to develop her technology properly, she was about to face its most powerful opponent. Don't worry, Bennett said, noting her expression. Just show him what the system can do. Results speak louder than theories or prejudices. The next morning, Maya stood in the facility's demonstration chamber, surrounded by monitoring equipment and observation platforms. Her team had worked through the night, preparing an enhanced version of the hummingbird swarm for a comprehensive demonstration. 50 micro-drones rested in their launch containers, each one representing a significant improvement over the versions that had saved the carrier. General Williams entered the chamber, flanked by military aides. He was tall and imposing, with the rigid posture of someone who had spent decades in command positions. His expression was neutral, but his eyes held unmistakable skepticism as they swept over the diminutive drones. Lieutenant Chen, he acknowledged curtly, I understand your devices performed unexpectedly well in a crisis situation. Yes, sir. The hummingbird swarm successfully countered a missile attack that threatened the USS Theodore Roosevelt. So I've been told. Though I find it difficult to believe that these toys, he gestured dismissively at the microdrones, could actually defeat a modern anti-ship missile. Maya kept her expression professional. Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful, sir. By all means. Williams stepped back, crossing his arms in a posture that screamed disbelief. Maya activated the launch sequence. The 50 Hummingbird units rose simultaneously from their containers, forming a perfect geometric pattern in the air before dispersing to their initial positions. Unlike conventional drones with their mechanical buzzing, the Hummingbirds operated in near silence, their biomimetic propulsion systems barely audible even in the enclosed space. The first scenario will demonstrate autonomous reconnaissance capabilities, Maya explained, activating the chamber's simulation systems. The room transformed around them as holographic projections created a complex urban environment filled with obstacles, civilian population, and potential threats. The hummingbird swarm immediately adapted, dispersing through the virtual city in a coordinated pattern that maximized coverage while minimizing detectability. The swarm is identifying and cataloging all military equipment, communications infrastructure, and defensive positions, Maya narrated as the drones worked. Information began appearing on the monitoring screens, detailed analysis of simulated weapon systems, personnel movements, and command structures, all collected without any direct operator commands. Impressive surveillance capabilities, Williams acknowledged grudgingly, but hardly revolutionary. Conventional drones can perform similar functions. The difference, sir, is that conventional drones require constant communication with operators, making them vulnerable to detection and jamming. The Hummingbird swarm operates autonomously, communicating only when necessary and using a distributed decision-making process that can't be disrupted by taking out individual units. She transitioned to the next scenario. Now, let's simulate an electronic countermeasures environment. The holographic projection shifted, introducing multiple jamming sources that would render conventional drones useless. The Hummingbird swarm immediately adapted, changing formation and communication patterns to maintain operational effectiveness, despite the hostile electronic environment. As you can see, General, even with complete communications blackout, the swarm continues to function effectively. Williams frowned slightly. Lieutenant, surveillance capabilities, while valuable, don't justify the kind of resources being allocated to this project. What happens when these autonomous units encounter actual combat situations? How do they distinguish between valid targets and civilian infrastructure? How do you prevent them from making catastrophic decisions without human oversight? This was the central concern, the fear that truly autonomous systems might act in unpredictable or dangerous ways without direct human control. Maya had been expecting this question. Sir, the final scenario will address exactly that concern. She activated the most complex simulation, a mixed civilian and military environment with multiple threat categories, rapidly changing conditions, and ambiguous targets that required sophisticated judgment to classify correctly. The Hummingbird swarm dispersed through this challenging environment with remarkable precision. As they encountered potential threats, information appeared on the monitoring screen showing the decision matrices the swarm was using to evaluate each situation. The system doesn't make binary decisions about targets, Maya explained. Instead, it classifies situations according to a sophisticated ethical framework and determines appropriate responses based on pre-established parameters in situations with insufficient clarity or elevated risk. The swarm automatically defers to human operators. She highlighted a specific example where the swarm had identified a potential threat, but refrained from taking action due to proximity to simulated civilians. The system is designed to be cautious when uncertainty exists, more cautious than human operators often are. General Williams watched the demonstration with growing attentiveness. The micro-drones moved through increasingly complex scenarios, consistently making appropriate assessments and demonstrating remarkable adaptability. Now, Maya said, let's simulate the carrier incident. The chamber transformed into a maritime environment. A simulated missile launch appeared on the tactical display, targeting the position where they stood. The Hummingbird swarm immediately responded, executing the same coordinated countermeasures that had saved the Roosevelt, but with even greater precision and effectiveness. As the simulation concluded, Williams remained silent, studying the data displays with intense focus. Finally, he turned to Maya. You've created something potentially revolutionary, Lieutenant. And that concerns me deeply. Sir, technology. This autonomous, this adaptive, represents a fundamental shift in how we approach warfare. The strategic implications are enormous, and not all of them are positive. Director Bennett stepped forward. With respect, General, those implications exist whether we develop this technology or not. Our adversaries are pursuing similar capabilities. The question isn't whether autonomous systems will be deployed in conflict zones, but whose systems will be more effective when they are. Williams frowned. That's precisely my concern, Bennett. We're rushing toward a future where machines make life or death decisions without human oversight. Lieutenant Chen's drones may have saved lives on the Roosevelt, but what happens when they make a mistake? What happens when they identify a civilian target as a military threat because of an algorithmic error? Maya met his gaze directly. Sir, the Hummingbird system is designed with multiple redundant safety protocols. Unlike humans, it doesn't act out of fear, anger, or exhaustion. It doesn't have ego or ambition clouding its judgment. You sound very confident, Lieutenant. I'm confident in the system's current capabilities, sir. But I'm also aware of its limitations. That's why our development process includes rigorous ethical frameworks and continuous improvement of decision-making algorithms. Williams studied her for a long moment. You know what concerns me most, Lieutenant? It's not actually your technology. It's the eagerness with which the defense establishment is embracing it as a magical solution to complex strategic problems. He gestured around the demonstration chamber. These machines performed well in simulations and in one real-world crisis. That doesn't mean they're ready for widespread deployment, or that they won't create catastrophic unintended consequences. I agree, sir, Maya replied, surprising everyone in the room. You do? The Hummingbird system isn't a magical solution. It's a tool with specific capabilities and definite limitations. Deploying it responsibly requires understanding both. That's why I've included comprehensive ethics protocols and human oversight mechanisms in the core architecture. William seemed taken aback by her response. He had clearly expected defensiveness rather than agreement. I'm recommending a controlled deployment program, he said finally. Limited operational testing under strict supervision before any consideration of wider implementation. That's exactly what I would recommend as well, sir. Bennett looked between them with barely concealed surprise. This was not the confrontation he had anticipated. As the demonstration concluded, Williams approached Maya directly. Lieutenant, your technical capabilities are impressive. But what actually gives me some confidence is your recognition of the technology's limitations. Too many developers see only the potential benefits of their creations, never the risks. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. I'm still going to be watching this program very carefully. One mistake, one system failure that puts lives at risk, and I'll shut it down permanently. As Williams departed with his aides, Bennett turned to Maya with a puzzled expression. That was unexpected. I thought he would fight the program more aggressively. He's not wrong to be cautious, Maya replied. Autonomous systems do present real risks alongside their benefits. Acknowledging. That doesn't make the technology less valuable. It makes its development more responsible. Bennett studied her with new respect. You know, Chen, when I brought you here, I was focused entirely on your technical brilliance. I'm starting to think your ethical framework might be equally important. They're inseparable, sir. A system that can make life or death decisions needs both. As she returned to her laboratory, Maya felt a strange sense of accomplishment. Not just because her technology had been validated, but because she had found common ground with its most powerful critic. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but at least now it existed. Dr. Weaver was waiting in the lab, her expression curious. How did it go with Williams? Better than expected. He's still skeptical, but he's authorized controlled operational testing. That's a significant victory. Williams rarely approves new autonomous systems. Maya began reviewing the demonstration data, already identifying improvements for the next iteration. He raised valid concerns. Systems like Hummingbird need robust ethical frameworks and careful deployment protocols. Weaver nodded approvingly. That perspective will serve you well as this program expands. The engineers who respect limitations often create the most enduring technologies. As they discussed the next development phase, Maya's secure tablet chimed with an incoming priority message. She opened it to find a classified intelligence briefing from Director Bennett. Satellite reconnaissance has identified new missile deployments in the disputed territory, the briefing stated. Intelligence indicates potential aggressive action within 72 hours. Hummingbird deployment authorized for enhanced surveillance. Effective immediately. Maya looked up at Weaver, her expression serious. It seems our controlled testing program just became operational necessity. Are you ready for that responsibility? Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here, from being mocked for her toy drones to leading a cutting-edge defense program that might help prevent an international crisis. The path had been difficult, filled with skepticism and resistance, but it had led to this moment of opportunity. Yes, she said simply, I'm ready. The Sierra Facilities Operations Center hummed with focused energy as Maya supervised final preparations for the Hummingbird deployment. 3 days had passed since the intelligence briefing, and in that time, her team had worked around the clock to prepare an enhanced swarm for this critical mission. 86 micro-drones now awaited deployment, each one representing significant improvements over the units that had saved the carrier. Final systems check complete, reported Dr. Karina Patel, the brilliant materials scientist who had helped redesign the Hummingbird's outer shells for improved stealth capabilities. All units are showing green across all parameters. Maya nodded, reviewing the mission parameters one last time. Deploy in 4 waves, 20 units per wave, with 6 held in reserve. Maintain maximum dispersion patterns and absolute emissions discipline. Director Bennett stood at the back of the room, observing without interfering. Beside him was General Williams, whose presence reflected the mission's importance. Despite his initial skepticism, the general had become an unlikely ally, insisting on rigorous testing protocols that had actually strengthened the system's capabilities. Lieutenant Chen, Williams called. A moment, please. Maya approached the 2 men, noting the tension in Williams' posture. The situation has escalated, he informed her quietly. Satellite imagery from 30 minutes ago shows advanced missile systems being prepared for launch. Intelligence believes they may be targeting the multinational peacekeeping fleet in international waters. Maya felt her pulse quicken. How long until potential launch? Estimates suggest between 4 and 6 hours. That's why your swarm needs to deploy immediately. We need eyes on those systems to determine exact capabilities and intentions. Sir, the Hummingbird swarm is ready for immediate deployment. But I need to be clear about operational parameters. This is still reconnaissance only, correct? Williams and Bennett exchanged glances. Primarily, yes, Bennett replied carefully. However, given what happened on the Roosevelt, we've authorized contingency protocols. If a launch is imminent and conventional forces cannot respond in time, your swarm is authorized for non-destructive interference actions. Maya understood the implications immediately. They were giving her permission to use the same techniques that had confused the missile targeting the carrier, but only as a last resort. Understood, sir. But I want to emphasize that the Hummingbird system is optimized for surveillance. Any interference capabilities are limited and should not be considered a substitute for conventional defensive measures. Noted, Lieutenant, Williams said, his expression serious. But sometimes limited options are all we have. Deploy your swarm. The deployment proceeded flawlessly. The Hummingbird units were transported by stealth aircraft to a release point, approximately 50 miles from the disputed territory. From there, they flew autonomously, using their biomimetic propulsion systems to approach undetected. In the operations center, the tactical display showed the swarm's progress as tiny dots, moving across the digital map. Unlike conventional drones that would have been detected by radar, the Hummingbirds remained invisible to standard surveillance systems. First wave has reached the primary observation zone, Maya reported as data began streaming back. Deploying to surveillance positions now. The intelligence they gathered was immediate and alarming. The missile systems being installed were more advanced than previous intelligence had indicated. A new generation of hypersonic weapons with enhanced stealth capabilities of their own. Those aren't defensive systems, General Williams observed. Grimly, they're first-strike weapons designed to overwhelm conventional defenses through speed and numbers. Maya studied the technical specifications being transmitted by the Hummingbird units. Based on these readings, they could reach the peacekeeping fleet in less than 6 minutes from launch. That's barely enough time for defensive systems to activate, let alone intercept effectively. And they're being prepared for launch now, Bennett added, pointing to the live feed showing technicians working on the missile platforms. These aren't exercises or drills. General Williams moved to the secure communications station. I'm notifying Pacific Command. All naval assets need to go to maximum readiness. Air support should be scrambled immediately. Maya continued, monitoring the Hummingbird data, noting patterns that others might miss. The missile crews were working with unusual urgency, and command vehicles had arrived at each launch site within the last hour. Sir, she called to Williams, based on the activity patterns and preparation sequences, I estimate they're planning to launch within the next 60 minutes, not 4 to 6 hours. Williams' expression darkened. Are you certain? The pattern matches pre-launch protocols exactly, and they've begun the fueling sequence at 3 of the 5 sites. He immediately returned to the communications station, relaying the updated timeline to Pacific Command. The response that came back was not encouraging. The nearest strike aircraft are 90 minutes out, he reported. The fleet can go to maximum defensive readiness, but they won't have air support before the potential launch window. The operations center fell silent as the implications became clear. If the missiles launched, the peacekeeping fleet would face them with only their onboard defensive systems, which might not be sufficient against this new generation of weapons. Maya studied the tactical display, an idea forming. Sir, the Hummingbird swarm is already in position. We have units observing each launch site. If we reconfigure for electronic countermeasures, we might be able to disrupt their launch sequences. That's well beyond the approved mission parameters, Williams pointed out. Those drones are authorized for surveillance and last resort. Defensive measures, not preemptive actions. With respect, sir, disrupting their command and control systems temporarily isn't the same as attacking them. We would be delaying, not destroying. Bennett stepped forward. She has a point, General. The swarm could target their coordination systems without causing permanent damage. It might buy enough time for our strike aircraft to arrive. Williams weighed the options, clearly uncomfortable with the choice before him. If this goes wrong, if your drones are detected, or if the disruption is interpreted as an attack, it could escalate the situation dramatically. And if those missiles launch, sir? Maya asked quietly. The general's expression hardened. Do it, but make absolutely certain your actions cannot be traced or attributed. This never happened. Maya turned to her team, already formulating the necessary approach. Reconfigure all units for passive electronic surveillance of their command and control frequencies. I want to understand exactly how they're coordinating before we attempt any disruption. The Hummingbird swarm shifted positions slightly, their sensors now focused on the electronic emissions from the missile sites. Data began streaming back, revealing the communication patterns between the command vehicles and the launch platforms. They're using a centralized command structure, Maya observed. All launch authorization flows through a single control vehicle positioned here. She indicated a mobile command unit situated in a camouflaged position behind the central launch site. Can you disrupt it? Bennett asked. Not directly, not without being detected. But we might be able to introduce subtle errors into their targeting data. Not enough to be noticed immediately, but enough to force them to reset and recalibrate before launch. She began programming new instructions for the swarm, designing a delicate electronic infiltration that would manipulate data without leaving evidence of external interference. It was like performing microsurgery with sound waves, requiring extraordinary precision and perfect timing. "Initiating operation now," she announced, sending the commands to the waiting swarm. The hummingbird units moved with coordinated purpose, positioning themselves in a pattern that would allow them to affect the command vehicle's communications without direct interaction. Each drone contributed a precisely calibrated electronic signal, none significant enough to trigger alerts, but collectively creating a subtle distortion in the targeting data being transmitted to the missile platforms. "Their targeting systems are showing signs of instability," reported one of the analysts monitoring the intelligence feed. "They're running diagnostic protocols." Maya watched the data streams with intense focus. They haven't detected external interference yet. They think it's an internal calibration error. For the next 20 minutes, the operation continued with nerve-wracking precision. The hummingbird swarm maintained constant pressure on the command systems, introducing just enough errors to force repeated recalibrations without revealing their presence. "Launch preparations have paused," the analyst confirmed. "They're doing a full systems reset." "Deploying reserve units now," she announced, sending the specialized drones into action. The tactical display showed the 6 units approaching the launch sites, their signatures now appearing identical to local bird species. They flew in natural patterns, occasionally perching briefly before moving on, behavior that would appear completely normal to anyone observing. "Units are in position," Maya reported, initiating electromagnetic pulse in 30 seconds. The operations center held its collective breath as the specialized hummingbirds positioned themselves directly above the command vehicles at precisely the same moment. All 6 units released a carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulse designed to temporarily disrupt electronic systems without causing permanent damage. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The command vehicle's electronic systems flickered and died, their communications arrays going dark. The missile platforms, no longer receiving coordination data, automatically entered safety protocols that prevented launch without proper authorization. "Electronic systems at all 5 launch sites are down," reported an analyst, unable to hide his amazement. "They appear to be experiencing a complete communications failure." "Any indication they suspect external interference?" Williams asked. "Negative, sir. Their security teams are still focused on finding drones near the sensor arrays. No one is looking up at what appear to be ordinary birds." General Williams checked the tactical update. "Strike aircraft now 15 minutes out. If this disruption holds for another 10 minutes, they'll be within range to provide a credible deterrent." Maya monitored the specialized hummingbirds as they maintained their cover, now moving away from the launch sites in natural patterns that wouldn't attract attention. The electronic disruption had worked perfectly, temporarily disabling the launch systems without revealing its source. "Sir," the communications officer called to Williams, "update from diplomatic channels. Their foreign ministry has agreed to stand down the missile systems pending further discussions. They're ordering a complete halt to launch preparations." A wave of relief swept through the operations center. The combination of diplomatic pressure and the mysterious technical difficulties at the launch sites had created the space needed for de-escalation. "Recall all units," Williams ordered. "Mission complete." As the hummingbird swarm began their long journey home, Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions. They had prevented a potential conflict through technological ingenuity rather than conventional force, exactly what the hummingbird program had been designed to achieve. General Williams approached her workstation. "Impressive work, Lieutenant. Your toy drones just prevented what could have been a major international incident." "Thank you, sir, but it was a team effort." "Indeed, but it was your vision that made it possible." He studied her with new respect. "I still have concerns about autonomous systems. but today demonstrated their potential when used with proper judgment and ethical constraints. As the operations center began standing down from crisis footing, Director Bennett joined them. The Secretary of Defense is requesting a full briefing on today's operation. He's particularly interested in the capabilities demonstrated by your Hummingbird system. Both its capabilities and its limitations, Williams added pointedly. We need to be clear about what these systems can and cannot do. Maya nodded in agreement. Absolutely, sir. The Hummingbird platform is a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement for conventional forces or diplomatic engagement. It's most effective when used as part of a comprehensive approach. Bennett smiled slightly. Lieutenant, you've come a long way from being mocked for your toy drones. How does it feel to have proven your critics wrong so decisively? Maya considered the question carefully. Honestly, sir, it's not about proving critics wrong. It's about proving the technology right, showing that innovative approaches can solve problems that conventional thinking cannot. Williams nodded approvingly. That's the right perspective, Lieutenant. This isn't about personal vindication. It's about developing capabilities that serve our strategic objectives while minimizing risk. As the debriefing concluded, Maya returned to her team, who greeted her with quiet congratulations. They understood the significance of what they'd accomplished, not just preventing a potential conflict, but demonstrating a new approach to international security challenges. Dr. Weaver joined her as she began analyzing the operation data. You know what impressed me most? The senior scientist asked. What's that? Not the technology itself, though it performed admirably. What impressed me was your restraint, knowing when to push the capabilities and when to pull back. That judgment is ultimately more valuable than any technical innovation. Maya thought about her journey from being dismissed as an impractical theorist to leading a critical national security operation. The path had been difficult, filled with skepticism and resistance, but it had led to this moment of validation. The real test is still ahead, she replied thoughtfully. How we develop this technology, where we deploy it, and what limits we place on its capabilities, those decisions will determine whether it becomes a force for stability or another escalatory factor in an already complex world. Weaver smiled. And that's exactly why you're the right person to lead this program. You see both the potential and the responsibility. As they turned their attention to analyzing the performance data, Maya felt a sense of purpose stronger than any she'd experienced before. Her toy drones had proven their worth in the most consequential way possible, not by destroying threats, but by creating space for peaceful solutions. The journey was far from over, but today had shown what was possible when innovation was guided by wisdom rather than just technical brilliance. That was a lesson worth more than any validation or vindication. 6 months had passed since the crisis, and Maya stood at the podium in the Pentagon's main briefing room, facing the combined chiefs of staff, the same military leaders who had once dismissed her ideas, now watched with undivided attention as she presented the final assessment of the Hummingbird program. In conclusion, she stated, highlighting the key metrics on the display behind her, the field deployments have demonstrated a 94% mission success rate across varied operational environments. The platform has proven effective in surveillance, electronic countermeasures, and non-kinetic intervention scenarios, while maintaining a near-zero detection profile. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Eleanor Harrington, leaned forward. Lieutenant Chen, excuse me, Captain Chen, your results are impressive. But I'm particularly interested in how you've addressed the autonomous decision-making concerns that General Williams raised initially. Maya nodded, appreciating the directness of the question. Her promotion to captain had come 3 months after the crisis operation, along with formal recognition that had remained classified, but had transformed her standing within the defense community. We've implemented a tiered autonomy framework, she explained, bringing up a new slide that displayed a sophisticated decision tree. The system operates with full autonomy for basic functions like navigation, self-preservation, and covert positioning. For any action that could affect external systems or be detected by adversaries, the autonomy level decreases proportionally to potential impact. She highlighted a specific branch of the decision tree. For critical decisions with strategic implications, the system automatically defers to human operators. We found this balanced approach preserves the advantages of swarm intelligence while maintaining appropriate human oversight for consequential actions. General Williams, now one of her strongest advocates, nodded approvingly from his seat. At the table, the journey from skeptic to supporter had been remarkable, a transformation built on mutual respect and shared commitment to responsible innovation. The Secretary of Defense will be joining us momentarily, announced General Harrington. He has some significant news regarding the future of your program. Maya used the brief intermission to center herself. The past 6 months had been extraordinary, filled with rapid developments, field tests, and continuous refinement of the Hummingbird system. Her team had expanded to over 100 specialists working across multiple disciplines, all focused on advancing the capabilities while strengthening the ethical frameworks that guided their deployment. The door opened, and Secretary of Defense Malcolm Reeves entered the room. Everyone stood as he made his way to the head of the table. "Please be seated," he said, his gaze settling on Maya. "Captain Chen, I've reviewed your presentation materials. Impressive work, as always. Thank you, Mr. Secretary." Reeves opened a folder on the table before him. "The President has authorized me to inform you that Project Hummingbird is being elevated to program status with dedicated funding for the next 5 years. You will serve as Program Director, reporting directly to a newly formed Autonomous Systems Oversight Committee." Maya felt a surge of pride, tempered by the weight of responsibility. Program status meant substantially increased resources, broader operational scope, and greater impact on defense policy. Furthermore, Reeves continued, the President has authorized limited sharing of non-sensitive Hummingbird technologies with our key allies for humanitarian applications. Search and rescue, disaster response, environmental monitoring, areas where your swarm intelligence approach could save lives in non-military contexts. This was unexpected but aligned perfectly with Maya's vision for the technology's broader potential. From the beginning, she had seen applications beyond traditional military operations. "That's excellent news, Mr. Secretary. My team has already developed variants specifically optimized for humanitarian missions. I thought you might have." Reeves smiled slightly. "Which brings me to my next point. The United Nations has requested technical assistance for an urgent situation in East Africa. Severe flooding has displaced hundreds of thousands of people, and conventional search and rescue operations are hampered by damaged infrastructure and continuing bad weather. They want to use Hummingbird technology to locate survivors." Maya realized. "Exactly. This would be the first deployment of your system in a purely humanitarian context. The President believes it represents an important opportunity to demonstrate American technological leadership in service of global humanitarian needs." The briefing room fell silent as the implications became clear. Using cutting-edge defense technology for international humanitarian assistance would represent a significant policy shift and a powerful statement about American values. "How soon could a humanitarian configured swarm be ready for deployment?" Reeves asked. "We have 20 units already configured for search and rescue operations," Maya replied. "They could be deployed within 24 hours. I would need to make some adjustments for the specific terrain and weather conditions, but those are routine modifications." "Excellent. I'll inform the President that we can support the UN request." Reeves closed his folder. "You should prepare to personally oversee the deployment, Captain. This operation will set precedents that extend far beyond the technical capabilities of your system. Yes, sir, I understand. As the meeting concluded, Maya found herself surrounded by senior officers offering congratulations and support. The contrast with her position a year earlier couldn't have been more striking. From being marginalized for her unconventional ideas, she had become a central figure in the evolution of defense technology. General Williams approached as the room cleared. "Quite a journey from toy drones to UN humanitarian missions," he observed. "A journey I couldn't have completed without your critical perspective, sir," Maya replied sincerely. "Your concerns about autonomous systems pushed us to develop better safeguards and more thoughtful deployment protocols. That's generous of you, considering how firmly I opposed your program initially. Good technology needs thoughtful criticism, sir. Without it, we risk developing capabilities that outpace our wisdom in using them." Williams nodded appreciatively. "The humanitarian deployment will bring new challenges. The UN operates under different constraints than military operations, with more stakeholders and public scrutiny. We're prepared for that. The humanitarian variants have enhanced privacy protections and stricter autonomous limitations. They're designed to find people, not gather intelligence or affect external systems. I have no doubt you've thought through the technical aspects thoroughly," Williams acknowledged. "It's the human and political dimensions that often prove most challenging in international operations." His words proved prophetic sooner than either of them expected. 48 hours later, Maya stood in a makeshift command center in Nairobi, coordinating with UN emergency response teams as the Hummingbird humanitarian swarm conducted search operations across flood-devastated regions. The micro-drones had been deployed from transport aircraft at dawn, quickly dispersing to cover areas inaccessible to conventional rescue teams. "We've located another group of survivors," Maya reported, highlighting a section of the digital map where Hummingbird units had identified people stranded on the roof of a partially submerged school. Approximately 28 individuals, including several children. They appear to have limited supplies and no communication equipment. Dr. Amara Okafor, the UN Emergency Response Coordinator, immediately dispatched helicopter rescue teams to the location. "That's the fifth group your drones have found in areas our conventional search teams couldn't reach," she noted. "You're quite literally saving lives with this technology." The operation had been running for 18 hours straight, with the Hummingbird swarm continuously providing location data on stranded survivors. Their ability to cover vast areas quickly while transmitting precise coordinates had revolutionized the search effort, allowing rescue resources to be deployed with unprecedented efficiency. Captain Chun, called one of the technical specialists, monitoring the swarm's operation, units in Sector 7 are reporting unusual activity at these coordinates. He highlighted a location near the border, well away from the main search areas. Maya examined the data stream from the Hummingbird units in question. They had detected what appeared to be a makeshift camp hidden in a forested area, with armed personnel and vehicles that didn't match UN or local government patterns. "Enhance visual data," she instructed, studying the imagery as it clarified. The scene was troubling, armed individuals loading what appeared to be looted supplies into trucks, with civilian captives being held under guard. Dr. Okafor, Maya called, "I think we've identified a potential criminal operation taking advantage of the disaster. Possibly human trafficking or organized looting." Okafor reviewed the data with a grim expression. "Unfortunately, this happens during major disasters. Criminal organizations exploit the chaos, sometimes kidnapping displaced persons or looting abandoned properties. Should we notify local authorities?" "Absolutely, but with care. This region has complex security dynamics. Some local officials may be compromised." Okafor turned to her security liaison. "Contact General Mutai directly. He leads the Special Response Unit for disaster-related crimes." As the UN team coordinated their response, Maya continued monitoring the hummingbird units observing the criminal camp. The swarm maintained perfect stealth, using the forest canopy for cover while gathering detailed intelligence on the operation. "They appear to be preparing to move soon," she reported, noting increased activity around the vehicles. "If authorities don't intercept them quickly, they'll relocate with the captives." Okafor looked troubled. "General Mute's forces are at least 2 hours away. The terrain is too difficult for rapid deployment." Maya considered their options. The hummingbird humanitarian variants weren't equipped for intervention. They were designed strictly for search and observation. But they were witnessing a crime in progress with lives at stake. "Dr. Okafor, would you authorize a non-kinetic intervention? The hummingbird units could potentially disable their vehicles without harming anyone, delaying their departure until authorities arrive." Okafor hesitated. "This is supposed to be a purely humanitarian mission, Captain. Intervening in criminal activities, even non-violently, crosses into security operations that have different authorization protocols." "I understand the concern," Maya acknowledged. "But we're witnessing what appears to be human trafficking during a humanitarian disaster. If those trucks leave, those people may never be found." After a moment's consideration, Okafor nodded. "You have my authorization, but document everything carefully. This will certainly raise questions about the role of autonomous systems in humanitarian operations." Maya immediately began reconfiguring 8 hummingbird units for a limited electronic intervention. Similar to the operation that had prevented the missile launch, the drones would generate a localized electromagnetic pulse that would temporarily disable the vehicle's electronic systems without causing permanent damage. "Units repositioning now," she reported, watching as the specialized hummingbirds moved into optimal positions around the camp. "Intervention in 3 minutes." The operation proceeded with precision. The micro-drones, still completely undetected, released carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulses that instantly disabled the electronic ignition systems in all the vehicles. To the criminals, it would appear their trucks had simply failed to start, a mechanical problem rather than external interference. "Vehicle successfully disabled," Maya confirmed, monitoring the confusion evident in the camp. "Based on their behavior, they're treating it as mechanical failure. They're attempting repairs, but that should buy at least 2 hours." Okafor immediately updated General Mutai, who accelerated his forces' deployment. The intervention had created the time window needed for authorities to reach the location before the criminals could relocate. 3 hours later, Maya watched the live feed as Kenyan special forces surrounded the camp, apprehending the criminals and freeing 37 captives who had been kidnapped from flood evacuation centers. The operation was a complete success, conducted without casualties and with the criminals taken completely by surprise. "Remarkable work, Captain," Okafor said as the situation resolved. "Your technology just saved those people from unimaginable suffering." "Thank you, but this raises important questions about the boundaries of humanitarian technology," Maya replied thoughtfully. "We intervened in a criminal situation using systems that were deployed for search and rescue. Even though the outcome was positive, it represents a significant precedent. A precedent worth establishing, in my view," Okafor countered. "Humanitarian operations have always existed in complex environments where the lines between rescue, protection, and security blur by necessity. Your technology simply gives us more options for protecting vulnerable populations without resorting to force." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent call from Washington. Secretary Reeves appeared on the secure video link, his expression serious. "Captain Chen, we've been monitoring your operation. The intervention against the trafficking group has created some diplomatic complications. The host government is publicly grateful, but privately concerned about unauthorized security operations on their territory. We obtained authorization From Dr. Okafor, sir, who coordinated with General Mutai before we acted. I understand that, and you followed appropriate protocols given the urgency of the situation. But this highlights the gray areas we enter when deploying advanced autonomous systems in international humanitarian contexts. Maya nodded. Yes, sir. I've been discussing those exact concerns with Dr. Okafor. The President has taken a personal interest in this operation, Reeves continued. He believes it demonstrates both the potential and the challenges of deploying advanced technology for humanitarian purposes. He's convening a special working group to develop comprehensive guidelines for future operations, and he wants you to participate directly. This was unexpected, direct presidential involvement, and an invitation to help shape policy at the highest level. I'd be honored to contribute, Mr. Secretary. Good, because this is just the beginning, Captain. The capabilities you've developed have applications far beyond what we initially imagined. How we govern their use will be as important as the technology itself. As the operation in East Africa continued over the next week, the hummingbird swarm helped locate over 300 stranded survivors in inaccessible areas, directly contributing to one of the most effective disaster response efforts in recent history. The humanitarian deployment had demonstrated the technology's value beyond military applications, opening new possibilities for international cooperation. Upon her return to Washington, Maya found herself in unprecedented territory. Briefing the President directly in the Oval Office about the capabilities and limitations of autonomous systems in humanitarian contexts. The fundamental challenge, Mr. President, she explained, is balancing operational effectiveness with appropriate constraints. These systems can do extraordinary good, but they require careful governance to prevent misuse or unintended consequences. President Harris nodded thoughtfully. Your operation in East Africa saved lives while raising important questions about the future of humanitarian technology. That's exactly the kind of innovation America should be leading, technology that reflects our values while addressing global challenges. He turned to the assembled advisors. I want a comprehensive framework for deploying these capabilities in partnership with international organizations. Captain Chun's team has created something remarkable, and we need to ensure it serves humanity's best interests. The meeting concluded with a presidential directive establishing the Humanitarian Technology Initiative, a cross-agency program that would develop ethical guidelines and operational protocols for deploying advanced systems in disaster response and civilian protection worldwide. As Maya left the White House, she found Dr. Weaver waiting for her. The senior scientist had become a mentor and friend throughout the Hummingbird program's evolution. How was your meeting with the President? Weaver asked as they walked together. Transformative, Maya replied. He sees the bigger picture, not just the technology's capabilities, but its role in advancing human security and international cooperation. A far cry from being mocked for your toy drones, Weaver observed with a smile. Maya laughed softly. The mockery seems like a lifetime ago, though in some ways it helped shape the program's success. When people underestimate you, it creates space to develop ideas without excessive interference. There's wisdom in that perspective, though I suspect no one will be underestimating you again anytime soon. They reached the Lincoln Memorial and paused, looking out over the reflecting pool as the evening light painted the scene in gold and amber. You know what I'm most proud of? Maya said after a moment of reflection. Not the technical achievements or the recognition, but the lives we've helped save. Technology is ultimately meaningful only when it serves human needs and values. That philosophy is why you've succeeded where others have failed, Weaver replied. Many brilliant engineers can build advanced systems. Few have the wisdom to understand how those systems should fit into the broader human context. 2 weeks later, Maya stood in the expanded Hummingbird Development Facility at the Sierra Complex. addressing her team as they prepared to begin work on the next generation of humanitarian variants. The program had grown exponentially, now encompassing specialized units for disaster response, environmental monitoring, and civilian protection in conflict zones. The next phase of our work carries greater responsibility than ever before, she told the assembled engineers and specialists. We're no longer just developing technology for national security applications. We're creating systems that will operate in the most vulnerable communities around the world, often when all other systems have failed. She gestured to the advanced prototypes displayed around the laboratory. These platforms will need to embody not just technical excellence, but the highest ethical standards. They will represent American innovation in service of global humanitarian needs. Dr. Karina Patel, now the lead engineer for humanitarian applications, stepped forward. The UN has already requested an expanded deployment capability for the upcoming typhoon season in Southeast Asia. Based on the East Africa operation, they believe our technology could reduce casualties by up to 40% in major disasters. Then that's our priority, Maya confirmed. We'll focus on enhancing range, endurance, and detection capabilities specifically for flood and storm scenarios. As the team dispersed to their respective projects, General Williams arrived for his scheduled review of the program's progress. He had become a regular visitor. His initial skepticism transformed into constructive engagement that strengthened the program's governance and operational protocols. I've just come from a briefing with our allies, he informed Maya as they toured the facility. 6 countries have formally requested access to the humanitarians under the Technology Sharing Initiative. They see what happened in East Africa and recognize the potential for their own disaster response capabilities. That's encouraging, sir. The humanitarian variants were designed with international cooperation in mind. Williams nodded approvingly. You've created something remarkable here, Captain. Not just the technology itself, but a model for how advanced systems can be developed and deployed responsibly. Thank you, sir. Though I couldn't have done it without the critical perspective you provided throughout the process. Critical perspective is valuable only when paired with visionary thinking, Williams replied. Your willingness to engage with concerns rather than dismiss them ultimately produced a stronger, more resilient program. As they reached the central development area, Maya paused to watch her team at work. Engineers and specialists from diverse backgrounds collaborated seamlessly, each contributing unique perspectives to the evolving technology. What had begun as her isolated vision had become a collaborative endeavor that transcended any single person's contribution. You know, Williams said thoughtfully, when I first heard about your toy drones, I saw only the risks and limitations. I failed to appreciate the transformative potential of approaching old problems in entirely new ways. That's the essence of innovation, sir, seeing possibilities where others see only constraints. Williams smiled. A lesson I won't forget. Again, and one I hope our military institutions will embrace more broadly. As the general departed, Maya returned to her office to find a special delivery waiting on her desk, a small, elegantly crafted display case containing one of the original Hummingbird prototypes, mounted alongside the Presidential Unit Citation, awarded to her team for the East Africa operation. Attached was a handwritten note from Secretary Reeves, from toy drone to presidential recognition in 1 year. Imagine what you'll accomplish in the next 10. America's future is brighter. Because of innovators like you who refuse to accept conventional limitations. Maya studied the tiny drone that had started it all, seemingly fragile, yet ultimately powerful enough to change the course of international events and save countless lives. Its journey from mockery to presidential recognition reflected her own transformation from sideline theorist to program director, shaping the future of humanitarian technology. The path hadn't been easy. It had required perseverance through dismissal and skepticism, courage to challenge established thinking, and wisdom to incorporate valid concerns into stronger solutions. But the results spoke for themselves, not just in technical achievements, but in lives saved and new possibilities created. As Maya looked from the mounted drone to the wall of her office, where photos from the East Africa operation showed rescued families reuniting after the floods, she felt a profound sense of purpose. The technology she had developed against significant resistance was now serving humanity's most fundamental needs, protecting the vulnerable, reuniting the separated, bringing help where it seemed impossible to reach. "From toy drones to hope," she murmured, touching the display case gently. "That's a journey worth every struggle along the way." The mockery had faded, the resistance had transformed into support, and the once dismissed technology had proven its extraordinary value. But for Maya, the most meaningful validation wasn't found in awards or recognition. It was in the lives touched and the possibilities created for a world where technology served humanity's highest aspirations. That was a legacy worth building, one micro-drone at a time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.